What advice would you give to someone like me that's my age, or maybe even younger, mid-20s, as to how to play the game over the coming years to make sure that I don't find myself in a position where I'm having to work two jobs, I'm poor, I don't have assets, I don't have anything to show for it? Like if you take it right back to being like maybe, let's say, a 20-year-old, a 25-year-old, how do you play the game? And when I think about this, I'm thinking like wealth creation, how to then preserve my wealth. Like, what's the game?
So the first part of the game is income.
Okay.
Without income, you don't have the cash to do the other things, to invest or to look for opportunities. So first thing is income. But even that's changing in how we earn incomes these days. It used to be you go and work for a big firm, you get paid, you get the benefit. That's all going and nobody wants to do it. So you kind of end up having to be an entrepreneur, work two or three different things. The point being, if you're 20s, do all of that. Work day and night.
Really?
Do as many things, learn as much as you can, fail as often as possible.
What about work-life balance in your 20s?
Fuck it. Because that's the time to put in the hard work. Your work-life balance actually comes out later. I'm a big believer in, yes, if you're straight out of university, go traveling for a year or two. That A, gets rid of the pent-up need, but also gives you a much broader perspective on the world than any other single thing that you can do in your life. After that, you get your head down, and you get your head down probably till your mid-30s.
Okay, so when you say get my head down, I'm guessing one of the most important things in that season of your life is knowledge acquisition.
Yeah.
And then if that's true, then the next question is, what type of knowledge should I be acquiring to set myself up for wealth in the future? Because I could go acquire knowledge of, how to clean a toilet or how to be a gardener. But what is the most high returning knowledge?
For me, it is firstly be an expert on something.
Okay.
And then a generalist on as much as possible. Right? Be that expert because somebody will pay you for that, at least for the time being. And we'll talk about how the world may change in the future. But for the time being, if you're an expert in whatever it may be, whether it's driving a taxi or whether it's a computer scientist, doesn't matter. Be an expert. Compete with yourself day and night to be the best that you can. So at least it's going to give you the chance to earn some money.
Okay, so just to drill down on that before we continue to move forward, how does one become an expert? Like, how do I have to show up to become an expert? You're an expert on many things.
Okay, so this to me there's a trick that I learned, and it's called manifesting your own destiny. And what you do is what I've always done my whole life is I envisage myself 5 or 10 years in the future. What do I want to be? And you look around you and say, okay, what are the things that I want to have, that future vision of myself, as opposed to the 30, 40-year path? It's too difficult. Give it 5 years. Where do I want to be in 5 years? Okay, and you look around that future world and you think, okay, well, how would I got here? If I've built a business cleaning windows and I've got 20 people working for me, well, how did I get there? Well, I would have had to have figured out, okay, how do I make this scale? How do I employ people? How do I train them to have the right standards? All of that. You ask yourself your question of what that success looks like. Mm-hmm. And you kind of deconstruct it and go back and make it happen.
So you reverse engineer it back from that 5-year reality. So window cleaner with 20 employees, I need to learn management skills. I need to learn how to clean a window. Accounting. I need to learn probably marketing.
Yeah.
So that I can spread the message of my business. I probably need to learn potentially like how to speak, like public speaking, because that's sales. So I need to learn sales.
And technology, what solvents, detergents that people are using, what other ways of doing it more efficiently and faster so I can beat the competitor.
Oh, so I might go and work for a big window cleaning company to see how they do it, to try and see the opportunity in what they're not doing.
Yeah, or even somebody who manufactures stuff for that sector. It can be anything where you can glean knowledge to give yourself an unfair advantage. Now, on podcasts, it always makes it like easy. Everyone becomes an entrepreneur, and before you know it, everybody's rich. It doesn't work that way. But all I'm trying to do is stack the odds in your favor of getting closer to that image of your future self. And you can reverse engineer it.
So I'm now an expert in whatever. I'm 29 and I'm an expert in window cleaning or whatever it might be. And I'm a generalist in many things. you're saying that's going to enable me to start to build wealth in something so that I can go to the next season of my life? Or
So when you become an expert or when you become good at something, if you're careful in your expenditure, you will produce excess income, right? Because people are going to pay you for your expertise. So if you manage yourself carefully in those first few years, that excess cash, you can then choose what to do with it. Now, maybe you want to build the real business that you wanted to build in the first place, the crazy idea you've had. And if you're in your 20s, you can take the risk and blow your savings on that crazy idea because you've actually learned how to build a business already by building the one that you started. Or you start investing. Now, the world of investments was this world of weird financial advisors, and they would tell you some things like, well, you do this, and then you're a 25-year-old. In 45 years' time, you'll get some money. I mean, fuck that. I mean, what am I going to get out of it when I'm 65 years old? I suddenly get a lump sum that I've spent my whole life saving for. I don't feel it. I've got no emotional attachment to my pension plan. And I've got real world problems to solve. I can't buy a house. I can't get married. I can't have kids. So I need to solve these in a shorter time period than my pension. My pension was suitable for a different generation that just needed enough after they stopped working. So I got to solve that. And the answer is investing. Then most people roll their eyes and go, oh, really? Stocks and bonds? It's boring. Yeah, but the world has changed. The world has changed in many, many ways, but it's offered us opportunities, whether it's investing in technology, investing in crypto, that gives us much higher returns, stupidly higher returns in shorter periods of time. Okay, that's magic. That's magic for young people. It may be too risky for their parents, but if you're young and you can take some risk, okay, here's your chance. So now you can build a business, use some excess savings, put them in investments. Now you're on the path.
So let's get on to investing then. But just before we get on to investing, I was playing through the different sort of personas of my audience, and I was thinking that some of them are working really, really, really hard at the moment. They're doing, they might be a cab driver, they could be, doing some sort of manual labor. And it feels to them that no matter how hard they work, they still don't have that excess income to invest. So for those people, and this is a little bit of maybe a contentious question, like, is there something that they're doing wrong as it relates to the game?
No, the game is the game. And you have to play the game. So, okay, so maybe you don't have thousands to invest. I've seen many, many people in markets like crypto go from $500 to $500,000. Now, there's a lot of people who don't either. But all I'm saying is the opportunity is there. You don't need to bet your house. You don't need to have huge savings. You just need to focus on what you're doing, understand how to manage risks a bit, and how to look for opportunities. And it's the self-teaching is, how do I become that guy who's got a $500,000 portfolio, considering I've only got $500 today or $1,000 today?
Is that possible still?
Yeah, very much so.
Haven't I missed the boat?
No. It's happening again right now in meme coins. This is fascinating. People watching this will go, oh, what a bunch of nonsense. These are coins, tokens, and we'll talk about blockchain and this later, but these are investments based on a meme.
A joke.
Something that grabs attention on the internet. And you can bet on those. Well, what is that? That's about betting on attention itself. If you think about a business like Facebook or Google or any of these, Twitter, they're all based on attention. And now we can bet on attention. Do people find that funny? Are they going to find it funny in 6 months' time or 6 weeks' time? And we can bet on this stuff. Okay, this is the super speculative end, but it's also very cultural. It's not about investment bankers. It's not about gatekeepers. It's about you pitting yourself thinking, is this going to catch on viral? And if it is it going to grow bigger? Now, some of those might do 1,000x in 6 months. Now, 99% go to zero. But all I'm saying is returns are there. And then you've got different levels of return. If we look at Bitcoin, well, actually, let's compare it. The S&P 500, and this will be an important number later.
What's the S&P 500?
That's the US stock market. It's the broadest measure of the stock market, and you can buy shares in it. Now, that grows at about 10% a year, 11% a year. So let's imagine you've got your $1,000. Well, 11% a year, it's going to take you a fucking long time to make any money, right? So it is not worth your time. The financial advisors will say, yes, you must do this, start now. I'm like, I'm sorry, it's just not going to change your life. Okay, then we go to technology stocks. NASDAQ does about 18% a year. Okay, that's starting to add up because these numbers compound after a while. You know, it goes from 1,000 to 1,200, and then, you know, it's another 20% on top of that, 20%. These numbers add up fast. Bitcoin, since 2011, been 145% a year, even with it falling 80% 3 times in the middle of that. So 145% a year, as long as you're in it long enough, okay, now that's really starting to pay off. And then as you get slightly more speculative, I take a bit more risk in things, well, the returns go up, but they become riskier. So once you start moving into that world, okay, this is a whole different world now. Now the guy with $1,000 can get rich.
What about buying a house? Because I think most people think the minute they get some excess income, and I know for sure, when I say most people, it's like 95% of people that walk the streets think that the minute you get some excess income, you should take it and put it in a savings account and buy your first house, get your first mortgage. Now, as a strategy for wealth creation and unfucking your life, is that a good approach?
No, because it's not wealth creation. People think of houses as like an asset, but in the end, you barely ever will sell your house to take the money out. You might downsize later in life. If absolutely needed, you might sell it. But generally speaking, your house is the lifestyle bank. Now, that is super important. And I think it is the most important trade of all, is the lifestyle bank. So what do you do this all for? You want lifestyle. So do you sacrifice your future self having more money by having a house and having security earlier? I would argue those days are gone.
What do you mean?
So I could do it because it was 3 times income.
Yeah.
So a house was not expensive for me. So I could start paying it off a bit sooner and it became not a big deal. But now your mortgage is likely a huge amount versus your income. You'll spend the rest of your life paying it off. And most of the time you're just paying off the interest. So you're not getting anywhere. You don't own that house. Anything goes wrong, the bank takes it away from you. So you've got to get more control of your life. And that is by having savings that are growing. Then you can make the choice. You know, let's say that example of the person gone from $1,000 to $500,000. Maybe en route, they say, well, I'm going to take some money off the table and put it in my lifestyle bank, and I'm going to buy a house. That's what I've done my whole career. And I find the lifestyle bank, that's the reward. Because now it's like, okay, nobody can take my house away.
So if I'm trying to build wealth, buying a house is not a good idea. It's not the best approach to take to build wealth. You're telling me that it's actually
Not wealth.
About psychology and about emotion, the house, and it's not about making myself wealthy. I wanted to read some of the comments that people often post when we talk about these subjects, because I think you're probably the guy to address some of them. I bought a house and it's the best thing I ever did. It launched my mindset in new directions. Remember that having your own space has profound psychological impact and can be life-changing for some that don't live in a healthy environment. I guess that speaks to your point about it being a psychological.
But you would also get the same feeling if you rented that was in a nice place and you knew that, you know, your rent was secure, it wasn't going to go up, whatever it was. I don't think there's any difference to that. As long as you can feel like you've got security, you can take risk and do other things.
I purchased a house in 2014 and I sold it 7 years later for 66K profit. I've put a large amount of the equity into a financial investment portfolio with my bank, and it's been down 2% since. I also put some money into different shares based on Warren Buffett's strategy, and that's now up 18%. A friend of mine also lost about 30 to 40K on investing in the stock market. You have to be careful. I don't think there's a correct solution. Some house purchases do amazing. This idea that some house purchases do amazing and some people make returns is a sentiment I often see about buying a house.
Yes. And, we're here today in the UK. There's a big idea about buying 2 or 3 houses, getting a mortgage, renting them out, using the cash flow to pay for the other one. Right? That's a lot of people's dream portfolio idea. I've rented out houses in the past. Generally, if you're not in a big city like London, it's generally often a terrible business because you've got to repair them. There's a lot goes on.
Headache. Tenants.
Yeah. It's people think it's easy money. I just do nothing and it all makes money. There is no easy money in this world, and there's risk, right? Because that little pyramid of mortgages are all backed by your income being able to pay the mortgage on the first house. If you lose your job, what happens? Then it becomes problematic because if you're losing your job, maybe the economy's slow and other people are losing their job, and suddenly before you know it, none of these mortgages are getting paid. And guess what? You don't own any of this stuff. Houses are not a safe investment. They feel safe because the price doesn't go up and down every day. It's not on the screen. It's not on CNBC. But they're illiquid, which means they don't often trade, but sometimes something happens in that equation. Either the price goes down or your ability to pay that mortgage goes. And then the whole thing collapses in seconds. And 2008 was that double. Everyone lost their jobs, so they couldn't pay the mortgage, and the house prices collapsed. And so I don't think houses are the panacea. They're not the perfect answer. Yes, they can be. Real estate is a decent opportunity. And we'll talk about debasement and currency and how that all works. And real estate is okay. It's certainly not the best. But yes, if you're rich and you can own these things without mortgages, and you can be the Duke of Westminster and own half of London and just collect rent, you can do that for X generations and be rich forever. I get it. But most of us don't get into that situation.
My brother, who has been an investment banker for about 10 years, now works in my company and my fund, he said to me when I was young, when it comes to creating wealth, what you want to do is focus on games that very few people can play, but you have a unique advantage in. Because everyone can buy a house, so you should assume that the returns from doing it aren't going to be amazing. So he was like, go find a game that you have high leverage, you have a unfair advantage.
Be the expert in something.
Be the expert in something where you, because of your knowledge, your expertise, your experience, your contacts, you can play that game, but very few other people can. And because that's where you'll yield your highest returns. And I always thought about that, just very logically thinking, if everyone can play the game, don't play that game if you're expecting high returns, because the returns are going to be very low. And I'll tell you, the first game everyone plays when they get a bit of income is buy a house. So logically, you can go, okay, that's not going to yield me the best returns unless I get lucky. Unless I get exceptionally lucky and I buy some barn in an area and then they build a bloody Whole Foods next door and it becomes the center of the world. Which isn't, again, the probability is still not great. So what do you think of that as a theory?
Well, it's the same theory as I said, is be an expert in something and you can find more opportunity. If you're just a generalist, it's really hard because you're competing against average people doing average things, right? If you're just working in an insurance office, I mean, there's thousands of people, plus you're competing with AI. How are you ever going to be something within that? How do you become an expert? Now, you could teach yourself, okay, if I don't mind this industry and I think I know it, maybe I need to learn management skills. Maybe I spend all the time listening to podcasts and learning management. Maybe I can then manifest my destiny. But as you say, doing something other people aren't doing is a superpower.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favor. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.